at the top of the class on a roll, and it's time to run it up, yeah, you know. Maxed out, put the pedal to the floor, ayy, on the road, here we go, yeah.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Mondays Down South. We got Zach on the line. Cy will be joining us at some point. And we got our favorite guest, Dolan, down at the bottom of the screen to talk some NFL. Dolan, maybe let you plug yourself a little bit here. You got some articles we always plug, but got a new place to find some of your articles if you want to plug that before we jump into the topic for today.
Yeah, sure. Appreciate it. First of all, calling me your favorite guest. I'm flattered on that one. And then also appreciate the hey, I'll take being in the conversation. Y'all do some good stuff over here. But yeah, I actually got my first official paid writing gig, which is super cool, writing for a company called FTN Fantasy. They're really, really good company. And so I'm kind of shifting my typical repertoire a little bit, not necessarily shifting, but expanding, I should say. To start writing specifically about fantasy football. All of my articles so far, considering the time of the offseason, have been talking about dynasty specific, but really excited to see where things go as we get closer and closer to the season actually starting and football heating up. Definitely plan on still writing on my own Medium blog whenever I just feel like talking about more general football rather than strictly fantasy stuff. But yeah, really excited. It seems like an awesome opportunity. A lot of really smart people I'm going to be working with, and just excited for a chance to keep talking ball, which is what I'm looking forward to right now as well.
Dude, yeah, just wanted to extend the congratulations, Mick. I mean, that's awesome news, man, and honestly, well deserved. We've been reading your stories and your articles for a long time, and honestly, I mean, Evan and I talked about this for a while, and Cy as well. But like, it's just really interesting how you are able to get that high quality video to break down film, and then talk about it for a little bit, and then dive into more film. So just the preparation that's gone into these articles. Really, you just doing it for fun, and now kind of moving into this new opportunity where you're going to focus predominantly on the fantasy aspect, but it also allows you to have the individuality and creativity that you currently do with your medium.com stories. So I think, it's a blessing in disguise, because it's not like duplicate work by any means. It's, you kind of have, they're separate, entities essentially, right? You can dive into the fantasy for a little bit, and then kind of refresh, take a step back, and then get right back into the content that you talk about, whether it's basketball, football, the whole 9 yards, usually Philadelphia oriented. So just wanted to extend the congratulations, man. And we've been watching you for a while, so super happy for you.
I definitely appreciate that. It's always good to have some support. It's one of those things where when you're putting some hours in, nice to have some dudes who are always getting your back. So I appreciate all the comments, the feedback, everything. It's nice to know there are some other people that care about this as much as I do. So I definitely appreciate you guys throughout all this.
And now we'll have to talk fantasy. I know we're trying to build out more of a fantasy presence this upcoming NFL season with Cy and some of that stuff. So I'm sure we'll have some good discussions on that. But we got the Philly guy on the line, so maybe we'll talk about some other sports here. What's the pulse on the 76ers after no Joel Embiid for the first few games here in the Miami series and a blowout in game 1?
It is not looking good, that's for sure. The Sixers don't stand a chance without Embiid. Like, they can, maybe steal a game or two here or there, but it was pretty obvious even in the first half when the Sixers kept it close last night that they were just a far worse team without Joel Embiid compared to the Miami Heat, who are just one of the deepest teams in the entire Eastern Conference and can kind of beat you in a multitude of ways. I know Doc Rivers got a lot of crap for last night, but I will tip the hat. He, at the very least, tried new things, ran out some different lineups to try and give Miami some different looks. But if James Harden's not an MVP candidate, the Sixers can't win this series unless Embiid plays just on a complete God mode level, even in a down an 0-2 hole, if that's what it looks like for game 3 and forward. But man, it's not looking great so far.
Yeah, I don't see how you guys are going to win a single game that Embiid's not on the floor for. I mean, your backup centers are just atrocious. So, well, and the matchup isn't easy because if you, like you said, I didn't watch the game 1, but I assume you tried to play a little small ball here and there. But like, Miami is not going to have any problems at all matching up with a small ball lineup, although they were without Kyle Lowry. But yeah, I think it's going to be tough. But I think it's funny with the Ben Simmons saga as well. We were talking about after that trade, it was like, everyone had to have an opinion on who won that trade. And then it came to a point where it was like, oh, maybe this is just a win-win. I think everyone was wrong. I think it was a lose-lose because Ben didn't play a single game. And then Harden, just, he doesn't look like his old self. But yeah, we'll see how the NBA goes. It's starting to get down to, I guess we're at 4 teams of conference here. So
I didn't even see the 76ers play last night. I saw the Houston Rockets. It literally reminded me of like the old Rockets basketball games where Harden's just chucking up 40 shots a game. So, they definitely, and Philadelphia is drafted super well over the years. So I'm not sure if you guys saw the clip where Harden clearly had some type of issue with his teammate. He tried to sit next to him to resolve it on the sidelines. And the moment that Harden moved,
it was Maxey.
That was wild.
The other guy got up and he wanted nothing to do with Harden. So they got to clean that stuff up over there.
Yeah, that was Tyrese Maxey, who with Embiid hurt is our best player right now. I would argue that right now James Harden is probably our 3rd best player. I know this podcast has poked some fun at Tobias Harris in his contract before, but he's been the Sixers' best player in a couple games this playoff series, and that's including a couple Embiid played in round 1. So tip of the hat to Tobias. Wish his efforts were going a little further right now, but yeah, it's not looking pretty. But I do see some signs of optimism for Harris. Maxey's a superstar, and then Harden. It's just like I'm praying that somehow this is just a hamstring, like lingering injury, not a he's washed. But the odds of that are getting worse and worse every day. It looks like.
Yeah. We'll see how it goes. I mean, theoretically, if Embiid comes back for game 3 at home, you haven't really lost anything because all you need is one of the road games. But Zach, you got any other topics you want to cover before we jump in?
You're wearing the Canes jersey, Ev. I mean, they strong win last night, unpredicted, I guess, unfavored win, despite the fact that it was at home. Yeah, what were the odds? And by the way, who are they playing? I just am glad we bet on it because we won a little bit of money last night.
Yeah, so they were like minus 120, so they were slight favorites, but they just dominated home in the playoffs, and like they're playing the Bruins, who aren't the same old Bruins, so they're just a much better team. So I think the line is just way too low. We're on our backup goalie for the first couple games, which maybe is why, but I don't know. As a biased Canes fan, that home ice advantage makes a big difference. So early on, but NHL playoffs are the best. Like I don't watch a ton of NHL during the season, but NHL playoffs are so fun. The atmospheres are amazing. The competitiveness is great. Obviously, there were a bunch of blowouts last night, but plus, I just love wearing the hockey sweaters as basically just hoodies and loungewear during the season. So a long road ahead, but hopefully a Stanley Cup run in the Canes this year. But we'll see how it goes. That's it for me. Want to jump into the topic?
Let's go ahead and do it. Maybe you can kick us off here. I think you were the one that initiated it, or you and Mick maybe came up with it together, but it's a fantastic topic.
Yeah, so obviously last week, NFL draft is wrapped. We've seen some post-draft free agent signings as well. Unfortunately, we did sort of do our live draft episode, but in all of my brilliance, I forgot to hit the record button. So you won't see any of that content. Luckily, it was mainly just me and Cy jabbering for 3 hours anyway. But it was an insane NFL draft, tons of trades. Obviously no quarterbacks really this year, so that added to some of the craziness. But we're going to I guess we'll do 5 maybe. I don't know if 5 will take too long, if we should only do 3. I know Sai's going to join us later, but thinking our top 5 most improved teams from the NFL offseason. So taking the draft into account, free agency into account, and trades from the offseason. And again, not our top 5 power rankings per se, our top 5 most improved teams. So a little nuance there. So Dolan, you want to kick us off? I guess should we do this? We got to decide. Are we doing this in any particular order, or are we just maybe spitballing names out there? I don't know.
I say we just spitball them out. I don't know if I can rank them. We might have to do 10.
It's hard to rank them, yeah.
I didn't come in ranked, but
I'm
happy to kick it off. I can give a little monologue, and then we can, pass it over to you guys and switch teams, however we're going to go. I'm cool with doing it pretty free flowing. But I think hometown team here, gotta show some love to the Denver Broncos. I think anytime you add a quarterback who is a borderline Hall of Famer, probably, at least on that trajectory, it does a lot for your offense. And that's when you're bumping up from like a league average quarterback, and what they got last year was far, far below league average play. It'll be super interesting to see how they hang in what's going to be an absolutely loaded AFC West. but their defense was probably one of the best in the league. It'll be interesting to see how well that translates without Vic Fangio now that he's out of the picture. But adding Russell Wilson, it looks like Javonte Williams is poised for a massive, massive breakout year. I think Jerry Jeudy's going to be healthy. The rest of the receiving corps is going to be healthy. I think that offense is going to be able to move the ball pretty well. Even if the defense takes a slight step back due to the coaching change, I think the Broncos are going to be in a really, really good spot heading into the season. But it is pretty crazy to think that being in that good of a spot could have them sitting at third or fourth in the AFC West, even if they are a better football team.
Yeah, that's a wild division.
It's going to be a crazy division this year. I mean, no mistake about it. Heads and shoulder like above any other number 2 division, in my opinion. All right. Well, I'm going to pick on maybe kind of an unorthodox team because I know some of the teams that Ev's going to pick. He's got inherent biases towards one team on the West Coast and one team on the East Coast. So I'm going to ignore both of them. And
are you telling me that I'm going to be the biased one on this podcast? Because just wait. I mean, I know the Eagles are coming up there from the bottom of your screen, and when Cy joins, he's saying the Colts. So don't call me the biased one on this podcast. But
take an Indianapolis Colts moratorium. I mean, we talk about it in the most ridiculous ways. Like sometimes Cy is able to bring the Indianapolis Colts up out of thin air. It doesn't make any sense. It's actually really impressive. He probably deserves an award. All right, but I'm going to bring up the Minnesota Vikings actually, and not just the fact that they were able to really beef up on their corners and their just like their secondary for the most part, but it's really a wide open division this year with Green Bay still not investing in a wide receiver. Lazard is currently listed as their number 1. I mean, that division is wide open. Certainly don't trust Chicago. Detroit will be better, but I think Minnesota can really take full command of the NFC North. And the reason I believe that is because you've got 2 amazing wide receivers on the Twins sides. You've got one of the best running backs, backup running backs, and then they just drafted a new guy as well. I believe he was the kid out of Chapel Hill. I forget, his name is escaping me, but you got the run, you got the run game settled. You've got Kirk Cousins, who's one of, a very above average play action quarterback and someone I certainly trust in. And Minnesota has certainly allocated a lot of money to. So, they've beefed up the offensive line. They did with this draft with the second round guard. And then they got Darashad of Virginia Tech, the left tackle last year. And then this draft in particular, they really invested in a lot of guys. So they got Booth, the cornerback out of Clemson, who I've been watching for a long time. Really, really big physical corner. Reminds me of Xavier Rhodes back when Xavier Rhodes was really detrimental and lethal kind of on the defensive front in Minnesota. And then lastly, it's, with Harrison Smith, who's one of our, the greatest safeties in the league right now. He is getting a little bit older. So they're still going to play him, but they also got another safety as well. I believe the safety out of Georgia, Louis Cine. I forget how to pronounce that, but I watched him. Yeah, he's a fantastic player and one of the 5 Georgia defensive players that was drafted in the first round. So definitely wanted to give Minnesota a shout out.
Yeah, I really, really like what Minnesota did in the draft. And it was a little unorthodox, which I think is one of the reasons I was so intrigued by it. They kind of just decided to take the shotgun approach and say, we're going to get a bunch of picks, which is something every team says they're going to do every year. But then you realize like that very rarely actually happens in practice because they get very tied to certain prospects. They said, this is a weak draft class rather than trying to take a couple of the top tier guys who aren't as top tier as you normally see. We're going to get a bunch of second round picks, a bunch of day 3 picks, and just kind of load up, plug some holes. It's new general manager. I can't remember exactly how to say his name. I think it's Kwesi something. I don't want to butcher it too much, but he's a very analytically driven guy. And I thought it was super, super interesting to say, hey, I'm not going to come in here and get my fingerprints on everything. I'm just going to get a bunch of good football players and raise the floor of this team before tinkering too much. So I really, really like their approach. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out with a good yet limited, we'll say, quarterback in Kirk Cousins. They're one of the better football teams still.
Yeah, that is actually really interesting, Mick. Just to touch on that, their GM that they just brought in, I don't believe he has any like pro football experience. He's like a JP Morgan exec, and he's amazing with numbers and making good decisions in high pressure situations. So like he's very different from, of what you would think the common GM that at least has tangible NFL experience. So I might be getting that wrong. I have to check that. But that's definitely my takeaway from him too. Really impressed.
I remember it was a very unique background. I read an article about him not too long ago in the offseason as well. He did spend a good amount of time coming up through the ranks with the Browns, I know, but before that, it was a pretty late transition to football. Yeah.
And they got Kevin O'Connell in there now too, Kirk's boy. So see how it goes. And the opposite of the Broncos, like they actually maybe have an opportunity to capitalize on some of the weaknesses the Packers have seen, which maybe we can touch on a little bit later, how they approach the draft. But I'm going to take this down south. I'm going to go with the Miami Dolphins. Obviously bringing in Mike McDaniel instead of Brian Flores this offseason, had some questions. Flores did a nice job there. Did he deserve to be fired? But I think now that you've seen the offseason play out and you've seen the kind of talent they've been able to bring in, they're basically rebuilding San Francisco, right? Tua and Jimmy G are, for me, like spot on comparisons, which I think is hilarious. Like similar type of quarterbacks, I think even in Tua's prime, I think that's the type of quarterback he's going to be, which is, yes, a knock on Tua, because I don't think he's particularly good. But the running backs are similar. They got Chase Edmonds now. They brought in Mostert, who's never going to be on the field because he's going to be injured the whole time. But regardless, Edmonds is solid. You look at the wide receivers, obviously bringing in Tyreek Hill is massive. But you also have Jalen Waddle developing in his second year. They have Gesicki, the 49ers, to George Kittle. And they brought in Alec Ingold to use that fullback role that Juszczyk plays in for the Niners. So they're rebuilding the San Francisco thing. They got Armstead to beef up the offensive line. That's the biggest thing for them, that they need the offensive line play to be a lot better. And if the defense plays like it does 2 years ago, I think they could maybe make some noise in what's a crazy AFC. But and Mike McDaniel has evil genius vibes. He's a super weird guy, but if you listen to his interviews, he seems like an absolutely brilliant guy. So they've kind of rebuilt things nicely there. Obviously, Tyreek Hill being the big addition.
I've got 3 problems with your argument. So number one, you just compared Mike Gesicki to George Kittle. Not going to let that fly. Number 2, Mike McDaniels, I think, is going to be so overwhelmed with head coaching responsibilities. He's a genius. He doesn't have as much, football playing experience, but that's not an issue because he draws up the most creative offenses of all time. But when you get pulled into a head coaching kind of responsibility, you have so many different things. I hope he doesn't get inundated in the details as a first-time head coach. So still don't necessarily trust him. And then thirdly, Tua is great, mid-range and short range, flat slants. You're talking about a deep threat like Tyreek Hill. Can you even get him the ball? Because by the time Tyreek, I can't imagine him saying this, but like, he's probably the only guy that could do this. He will literally outrun the football. So can Tua get him that? Those are my questions.
So to number 3, though, the Chiefs weren't really able to do that this year either, because of how that was more how defenses were playing them. But defenses were saying, all right, I'm done with the 80-yard bombs to Tyreek. Like, you can get it to him short, and then he's just going to run in between and around us, which is exactly what he did. But they weren't even able to get Tyreek, the ball downfield as well. But yeah, Tua sucks. That's the problem. So that's what's going to hold him back.
I think the big difference is between how defenses stopped the Chiefs last year, though, is you kind of needed to allocate extra portions of your defense to stopping that deep ball and to stopping Tyreek Hill down the field. Whereas with the Dolphins, if Tua is what it sounds like we kind of think he is, you might not have to do that. And so I'm very interested to see if defenses are like, no, Tua, we understand Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are out here. Can you beat us? I think how they play him is going to be a real sign of like, okay, what do other defenses really think of this guy at quarterback, which is ultimately, as is with most other teams, what I think will ultimately make or break their season is how good is Tua Tagovailoa. And I wrote about this a couple weeks back. I think that it was very clear that Brian Flores, before he got fired, did not believe in him. And so it'll be very interesting if after all this, he's the one that has the last laugh. And it's just like, I told you guys, like, he ain't it. But management sure seems to think otherwise, and they're giving him a chance to prove it.
He gets 1 year, and then Tom Brady will be the quarterback next year. But Dolan, what do you got? What's your second team?
This one, I think you guys, it's going to sound like are going to disagree with me a little bit here. This is not my big one that I know you guys are preparing for, but contrarian take, I actually think the Green Bay Packers got a lot better this offseason. Seems insane to think that that's possible without Devontae Adams, but going into the draft, I kind of thought whichever team just says we're going to take the strategy of drafting as many Georgia defenders as possible is going to come out with a noticeably better defense. I think the impact that their 2 first-round picks, Wyatt and who was the other one? I'm already drawing a blank.
Quay
Walker. Yeah, they're just I think they're just gonna ball out. I think they're gonna make this defense so much better. And if Aaron Rodgers is the $50 million quarterback that we think he is, you don't need a number 1 receiver. If you're that good and you're protected, which he'll still be working behind a solid offensive line, like you better be able to make the offense work on your own. And I think Green Bay just vaulted into the tier of having a very, very good defense. So I realize that's a bit of a contrarian take, but I think they're still, in my eyes, the favorite to win the NFC this year. And so it's tough to get better when you were already like a 12-win team, but I think they somehow found a way to do it despite losing one of the best receivers in recent memory.
Yeah, I don't agree with your take that they got better, but I do agree with your general mindset of like, this is how the Packers do it. They've been doing it like this for years. So like sticking to the model of, just, I don't know, drafting solid guys on defense, building up a defense. And plus with Aaron, it's like you said, like he can win with anyone. So he's got a real raw guy in Christian Watson. So we'll see how that goes, but he can win with anyone. So I don't agree with it. They got better, but I still think they're definitely the favorite in the division, if not the conference as a whole. So Zach.
All right, so I'm going to bring it back east over here and give the Baltimore Ravens a shout out. I mean, what they did from the draft standpoint, they were ranked, 1 or 2 out of the 32 teams based on how they drafted and how they kind of circumvented a lot of their picks, including, that one defensive end, his name's escaping me, out of Michigan, who probably won't come back I think it's like Jabo. Yeah, Jabo. I think he's supposed to be out the first 7 or 8 weeks of the season. But why rush it when you already have a guy like Calais Campbell? Their pass rushes, will have an increased weapon, a guy who would have been a first-round pick. You get Kyle Hamilton to solidify the safety need with Chuck Clark, who's a fellow Hokie. You also have Marcus Williams out there. So the DBs out there, I mean, it's almost like Ed Reed-like when I can't really remember a time where Baltimore had such fearsome DBs out there, especially with Marcus Peters coming back and Marlon Humphreys. They're coming out for redemption against the Cincinnati Bengals and what Jamar Chase did to them last season 2 times in a row. So I think with a healthy defense plus the way they drafted, I think they're going to kind of pivot back up to the top, that fearsome Ravens defense that we always know and love. And then on the offensive side of things, a little worried about the receivers, but we'll see if the kid from Minnesota that they drafted 2 years ago, he's their number 1 now. His name's escaping me too.
Bateman.
Yep, Bateman.
He's good.
Yeah, he is good. And he's a possession-oriented receiver. That is exactly what Lamar needs. He does not need some Hollywood Brown deep threat. And Mark Andrews coming back. Plus, all of their running backs are coming back healthy too. So don't count out the Baltimore Ravens in 2022.
I think that's a good thing, especially on the draft front. They had a really solid draft. It's going to be interesting. Them and the Bengals is going to be fun this year, man. Because the Bengals aren't good. The Bengals didn't, they've had a nice offseason as well. So I don't think they're going to take as big of a step back as people think. Dolan, any takes on the Ravens?
Yeah, they were on my list as well. And I think 1, they hit a home run in the draft, but I think 2, like it's kind of cheating, but just all the guys they're getting back from injury is going to make them a substantially better football team if they have an ounce of better luck in that department. And I think they will. I think their moves, like trading away Hollywood Brown and swapping him out for a center, drafting a couple tight ends and getting kind of beefing up the trench play a little bit is a sign that they're most likely going to revert back to what they did in 2019, 2020 and say, hey, we're going to continue running the ball right down your throat with Lamar Jackson. And now, knock on wood, a couple healthy running backs that know what to do with the ball in their hands. I'm super excited for the Ravens. I do not understand why they are not viewed as one of the AFC's elite tier of teams. I think they've got just as good a shot at the Super Bowl as anybody.
See, all right, I'm going to stay in the same division as my first pick, and I'm going to take the team that had one of the best drafts I've seen, maybe in my lifetime, which is the Jets. Obviously, they had tons of picks, but to get Sauce Gardner at 4 is great value, who wasn't even the first corner off the board, which blows my mind. To get Garrett Wilson as not even the first wide receiver off the board at, 10 or so, was fantastic value. And then, what is his name? Johnson, the Florida State DN that just completely fell through the first round, and to trade back up in the first round and grab him and then get Breece Hall as well. It's hard not. I mean, obviously the Jets are going to jet, but it's hard not to be excited about what you've got at this point, right? You got the quarterback last year. You've got a really good coach, in my opinion. And now you look at the offense. You got two good running backs. Michael Carter looked very good last year. Elijah Moore looked fantastic last year. They signed Uzomah and Conklin in free agency, a couple of tight ends. We'll see how Zach Wilson is, but I think they're pretty encouraged by him. And the last couple of years, what they've been doing in their draft is more beefing up in the trenches, right? Elijah Vera-Tucker last year, Mekhi Becton a couple of years ago. They've really been beefing up the offensive and defensive line. And then now you're starting to see them bring in those skill position players. So they're in a hard division, hard conference. They're not necessarily going to compete this year. But I think as a Jets fan for the first time in forever, there's a ton of reason for optimism with what they're building. Now that you start to see it in skill position, more sexy names as opposed to the guys in the trenches. But
yeah, I think especially in a lot of those names you mentioned, on the offensive side of the ball is where the Jets are really going to take a step forward. I think because they were so bad in general last year, people didn't realize that it was their defense that was substantially worse than their offense. And Zach Wilson definitely showed some flashes, this time towards the end of the year. So I do think a lot of those increased weapons, hopefully beefing up some of the trench play a little bit, and then just some natural progression from year one to year two. That offense I think is going to take a pretty sizable step forward. I think even with the additions of Sauce and Jermaine Johnson, that defense still has too many holes, and they're still going to be one of the worst. But I think they are taking a massive step in the right direction towards creating something you can build upon in theory with a pretty stacked offense, and then saying, hey, you know what, we want to make sure we develop our quarterback, put him in a position to succeed. And then once we figure that out, we'll deal with building a complete roster and attacking the defensive side of the ball afterwards. So I do like what they're doing in New York, but I kind of like you agree that they're definitely still going to be one of the worst teams from a strictly win-loss perspective in the NFL.
So we'll make it one more time through. We'll see if Cy joins. So if you've been saving one, which I know Dolan has been, use it now. Use it now.
Yeah, I guess with that precursor, I can go. It's hard not to get super excited about what the Eagles have done this offseason. I think a lot of people were underwhelmed with the relatively quiet free agency, with Hassan Reddick really being their only big signing. They, added some depth pieces, brought a couple guys back, but didn't do anything super exciting there. But their pass rush was pretty awful last year for a team that tends to prioritize that area of their football team. And so adding Reddick alone is going to be a huge boost. And then on draft night is when they really decided to cause some earthquakes. I think Jordan Davis, I know he was the 13th overall pick, but I think he's going to be the guy who in a couple of years from now is still going to be viewed as the steal of the draft. I know a lot of people are claiming that about the Eagles' third round pick, Nakobe Dean, who, like I was talking about with the Packers, I think the strategy of let's just draft from the Georgia defense is going to look like a genius move in a couple of years. I think it's going to look like exactly what drafting from the Bengals not the Bengals, same thing, the LSU offense a couple of years ago looked like when that team was trotting out Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Clyde, who, didn't work quite as well, and Terrace Marshall. I think the Georgia defense is on that level. So super, super excited about the additions of Jordan Davis and Nakobe Dean to that defense. And then all of this excitement is, before even mentioning the name A.J. Brown, who is, in my opinion, one of the probably 4 or 5 best receivers in the league. And this was pre-Eagles bias. And so all offseason, all I really wanted the Eagles to do offensively was get a solid number 2 receiver. And instead what they did was draft someone better than Devontae Smith, who I think had a great rookie year, make him the number 2, and they added a guy who just I think is going to absolutely change the dynamic of their entire offense. And similar to what we were saying about Tua, Jalen Hurts is going to have a really big opportunity to say, hey, are you the guy? Are you a good enough quarterback? You guys know as well as anybody, I am probably irrationally high on the Jalen Hurts train, but I think the offense is in for really big things, and I think the defense, especially on the front line, took a huge improvement this year. So I'm excited, and I will stop talking now. Otherwise, I will just go on and on and on.
Yeah, maybe I quickly chime in here. I really like those points. I totally agree with you. I think the NFC East, for the most part, drafted really well, maybe with the exclusion of Dallas, that Washington, Philly, and New York did a really good job. But one thing that struck me the most when you were kind of referencing the Eagles, Dolan, was moving Smith to the number 2 wide receiver. And I really like that because I've witnessed it myself with my own team, the Atlanta Falcons, and watching Calvin Ridley thrive off of number 2 corners with number 1 wide receiver skill set. And so when Julio was, pretty much being shadowed by a corner and a safety at all times, Ridley was able to eat. He was a double-digit touchdown scorer and had over 1,000 yards in his prime year the year before, obviously the debacle that unfolded this offseason. But I really do think Devonta Smith could have similar numbers just because of the pure route running ability and just the knack for finding the end zone. So, AJ Brown kind of reminds me of like a Julio build, and he's certainly going to be very, very feared on the field. People know where AJ Brown is at all times. And that really could open the floor for a guy like Devonta, who was really shadowed by number 1 corners, and really having Jalen Hurts run for his life. So Jalen now kind of in a more structured role, being able to see the field better and have 2 receivers get open on a consistent basis. That's dangerous. That's really dangerous, especially when you drafted predominantly defensively. So thought it was just a hats off by Howie, who's gotten flack before for the TCU grab with the Reaper, but he's certainly been resilient in this effort and excited to see what they do this season.
Yeah, I think the Eagles definitely have to be on the list. I think the draft, like you said, the draft was great. I think Jordan Davis picking up the center. We'll see what Nakobe Dean does once he takes his presumably, I guess, a red shirt year. And like draft what you're good.
Sounds like he's going to play.
Yeah, we'll see. And draft what you're good at, right? Like you guys are historically horrendous at drafting wide receivers, which makes no sense given the last couple of years how receivers are done. But you're good at drafting in the trenches. So you draft in the trenches and you trade for the wide receiver. I have no problem with the trade. I don't love the 25 million tag on AJ Brown, who's misses 4 games a year and drops a crap ton of passes. But
yeah, Jalen Hurts is making like $4 million this year. You can afford to overpay for a wide receiver.
Well, that's my other question is I don't believe in Jalen's passing. I do like that you guys are going to continue to pound the rock and use his legs as well. I don't believe in his passing, but yeah, I'm not looking forward to AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert on a team that can run it down your throats at will and has a quarterback out of the backfield that can run circles around you. So definitely think they've had a good offseason. I want to let Cy in. He's waiting in the chat here as well. So let me admit him here. Yeah.
We'll give him one.
All right, good. Because I got a serious question for this group before we transition topics.
Big Cy, sorry we made you wait, but you with us?
Oh, iPhone.
What's up, Cy?
Your boy coming off a freshly pulled hamstring.
Oh,
he got a solid like 4 RBIs today and 2 runs scored, but a very freshly pulled hamstring. But I could not pass up the opportunity to be on this episode. I heard Dolan was going on quite the spiel, boys. So
it wasn't bad. It wasn't too bad. I just didn't want to interrupt him. So
understood.
Sorry to hear. I was going to ask how the game went, what the stats were, but it seems like the injury bug overshadows a nice day at the plate.
Yeah, stats were decent. Injury bug not the best. Hopefully, I'll be back out there soon. But we did not win either of the games, but the team camaraderie was great. I was chewing on some sunflower seeds and popping some bubbles while I was making plays. So it was good day for that. Good to be on, boys. I'm sure I missed quite a bit. Sorry for the late jump on. I guess I'm the guest for today, but how y'all doing? How's this conversation been going? Dolan, I'm guessing you got a lot of good things to say about the Eagles. I would too if I was in your shoes. Zach, I'm curious. Did you talk about your Falcons pick yet?
No, actually, I've been ignoring them. I did want to mention something about what I was going to say wiffle ball, Ev, because of all the summers we played wiffle ball together. But in terms of the rec softball league, as bad as that event was with you getting injured, pulling the hamstring, I feel like I might have you beat. The last softball game I played, I slid in the third in Charlotte, and then the third baseman tried to fight me. So, so it's safe to say I've hung up the glove there in that sport and gone on to other endeavors. So that was interesting. In a co-ed softball league, I was taking it maybe a little bit too seriously. So
hey man, I love a good chirp session. I'm not trying to throw hands, but I love a good chirp session out there on the pitch.
Man, Zach, you did the right thing, bro. Sliding is what you should be doing. That's on the third baseman if you can't understand the fundamentals. All right, call him out every time. Gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be on. Zach, right. I'm ready to delve into those Falcons though, bro.
Wait, I think Dolan had a hold on. We got to finish. Dolan had. He's excited to ask a question.
Yeah, so. The spiel is over, but like as an Eagles fan, I think the Cowboys got legitimately worse this offseason. I think they, lost a couple kind of key contributors, Amari Cooper being the big one. I know they lost a couple trench players as well. And the Eagles, like I was just, ranting about, I think got substantially better. Are the Eagles the favorite in the NFC East right now? From a very, very biased perspective, I will 100% admit that. Think the answer is legitimately yes, or at the very least, it's close to a coin flip. Would love to hear some unbiased opinions on how ludicrous that take is.
I don't think it's ludicrous at all. I'll come in hot and not waste any time, but I don't think it's ludicrous at all. I personally think the Eagles are the best team in that conference or in that division. I don't think the Cowboys are going to be like that much worse than people are making them out to be. I do agree losing Amari Cooper was a big loss, but I think CeeDee Lamb is ready to take over as that number one. I think he's been ready to take over as that number one. Zeke has been a little bit wishy-washy, but I think Tony Pollard has been a fine backup, and I think we could probably see a better season from Zeke. I don't think their offensive line is that much worse. Their defense is still pretty intact. Micah Parsons was insane last year. Obviously, they have Mr. Interception at cornerback, albeit not the best at not letting up yards. So I still think the Cowboys will be good, but if I had to pick a team to win that division, it's the Eagles for me, just because of the improvements that y'all made. I will say, though, I don't know if Zach and Ev touched on this. I actually don't know how I feel about that A.J. Brown acquisition, in the sense of I think he's going to be amazing for your team, but was it worth giving up a first and third round pick and then paying the guy $100 million after 2 or 3 seasons? That is a question that I have for myself. Don't get me wrong. I'm excited Titans in my division aren't going to happen, but I am curious to see y'all's perspective on if you thought he is worth that. I guess the receiver market is hot, but I am curious to see what y'all's opinion is on that too. So I guess now we have 2 questions.
Yeah, I think if you draft a receiver in the first round and he turns into A.J. Brown, you're ecstatic. So trading the pick and, throw a third round in there for, a guaranteed thing, totally worth it in my book. And I was just saying this before you hopped on. Jalen Hurts is making $4 million this year or something like that. When you're looking at other quarterbacks making north of 40, I'm okay with overpaying. I'll even admit maybe A.J. Brown when you're able to have that much cap flexibility due to having a rookie QB. So we'll see. It's up to Jalen Hurts now, but I obviously love the move.
Fair point. I'll kick it over to Zach. Let's get his thoughts.
Yeah, I see your point there, Mick, but I think you're getting a little bit too excited. And the reason I say that is because Philadelphia played from behind the majority of the season last year. They had that iconic comeback in Charlotte last season. I was out watching the game with a ton of my buddies. Actually, Cy, we were coming back from the South Carolina game that weekend when Philly was playing there. So we caught the tail end of it. And, Philly, came back from like a 19-7 deficit, came back and won. And that was very, instrumental in like how the trajectory of their season went, right? Because I think they went like 7-9 or 8-8 or 9-7 or whatever. I guess it was like 9-8 in the 17-game season. So overall, my point is, despite the fact that they were able to get to the playoffs, there was a little bit of luck involved. And it was like, okay, fourth quarter, Jalen Hurts is going to do miraculous things and somehow pull them back into this game. So I would like to see a little bit more structure before I call them the division favorites, despite the fact that Dallas did not draft well in comparison to the rest of the NFC East teams. And also the fact that Amari Cooper left. And if you look at Dak Prescott's stats with Amari Cooper in comparison to without Amari Cooper, kind of that clutch, possession-oriented receiver that allows CD to kind of, get more open on deep routes and Michael Gallup, et cetera. They also lost Cedric Wilson. So, there are dangers with Dallas, but I still think Dallas is the favorite. And I honestly think Washington could be a kind of a dark horse team too.
That's a high-end Cooper statistics nugget, Zach. I like that. But Cy, I'll give you both. I had a similar take on A.J. Brown. I actually have no problem with the draft capital, somewhat jokingly, because the Eagles have been so horrible at drafting wide receiver in the last few years, but also not joking. So it's like, all right, we can't draft receivers. Our receiver scouts must just suck. I don't know. So I have no problem with the draft, like trading for him. But this receiver bubble is nuts. Like $25 million for a guy that in my book's not a top 10 receiver, especially on a team that's run first. Like, but that's a good point on Hurts making basically nothing but that's kind of a for now situation. If Hurts is your franchise quarterback, sure, but if he's not the guy, you're gonna have to go find a guy, and he's probably not gonna be making $5 million. So the receiver bubble is so interesting. You got to do what you got to do, I guess. But I kind of like obviously the Titans took a huge hit going down from AJ Brown to a rookie in Burks, but like I kind of like what teams are doing in that regard, like Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill. Like I kind of think that's a sustainable front office approach. And I mean, I'm obsessed with Terry McLaurin. I think he's underrated with good quarterback play, but it's like, can I make sense of paying him $25 million? Like $25 million goes a long way in the NFL. So that's kind of my problem with is the number. But and in terms of the Eagles, I agree with Zach that I think there's going to be some natural regression because you guys had the Washington football team from the year before situation where you played all backup quarterbacks like the entire season. But the schedule also, since you didn't win the division, isn't going to be all that much harder this year. So, and I don't necessarily I think the Cowboys are, quite a bit worse. I disagree with you guys. I do think they take a big step back this year. And we have a lot of question marks. Like I think any of those three teams, and I don't think the Giants are going to be awful either. So I think it's going to be a usual kind of, they're going to beat each other up. I don't really know who's going to come out on top. I maybe pick the Eagles if I, gun to my head right now, but I think all three of those teams, excluding the Giants, but also the Giants, I don't think are a complete.
I have two hot takes actually, based off what Evan just said. I actually think the Giants have the best offseason out of all those teams because I legitimately believe the Giants are way better than they were last year. Just the draft alone. I mean, granted, they have the draft capital, so similar to Jets situation, but they addressed their offensive line, they addressed their defensive line in a big way with their picks. And I'm a firm believer in building from the trenches. And maybe that's my bias, is having Ballard as a GM with the way we've drafted. But I believe that they have improved significantly. I'm not saying that they're going to go win the division this year, but I think they took a huge step forward. And I think they will steal some games. And it would not surprise me if they made some noise in the division. I will say this. I do still think the Eagles will win the division. But if you ask me who the best receiver in that division is, my answer is actually CeeDee Lamb. If you go watch the tape last year, like I understand that AJ Brown's numbers have been terrific the last 2 years, but AJ Brown also just gets way more play in that Titans offense as the number one, especially with Julio being hurt. CD without Amari as that number one option, like he is unbelievable. What he can do as a one-on-one player, and I am so excited to see what he does as that number one option with Gallup as the two and not having Amari in that offense, because I think it means more targets for him. And I think he's going to be the best receiver in that division. And I think he's going to be one of the best receivers in football next year, just from game tape. That's how I feel about CeeDee Lamb. So I will say that. And AJ Brown's getting paid like Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams. And that's the part that bothers me a little bit. Like granted, I will say it's not nearly as bad as Christian Kirk with the Jaguars. So at least we can hang our hat on that one and point that out. But that bothers me a little bit. But I do agree with you, Dolan, that if your goal is to win now and Hurts is making $4 million, you got to make moves, and at least you got a sure thing. So I relate to that point.
Plus, another thing that I think is kind of getting lost in this comparison of AJ Brown's contract / money to the Tyreek Hills and Devontae Adams. One, he got a couple million less than those guys, and two, he's like 4 or 5 years younger, which I think gets very, very lost in this. Like AJ Brown is, I believe, entering the prime of his career, as is CeeDee Lamb. I also love CeeDee Lamb. I wish he wasn't on the Cowboys so I could genuinely root for him because I think he's such a fun football player. But I think both of those guys, we're going to kind of blink and be like, where on earth did all of these studly NFC East receivers come from? And it's going to be pretty exciting. I think Terry McLaurin, honestly, is not far off from either of those two either. But like Evan was saying, some quarterback struggles over the past couple of years haven't let him showcase that as much as you'd like to see.
I think both receivers are like systematically appropriate for the offensive schemes that they're currently designed in. Like I think AJ Brown is kind of built for this Philadelphia offense. And we were kind of talking about this before, Cy, with Devonta Smith, almost, now going up against that number 2 corner, and much like Calvin Ridley did back in the Julio days, and being able to exploit that person, for double-digit touchdowns and over 1,000 yards. So AJ's kind of like that centerpiece that Philly needed. And I don't think CD would translate as well for what Philly's trying to do. And then on the flip side of things, I don't know if AJ Brown would be perfectly appropriate in Dallas's offense because Dak likes to get the ball quickly and CD's got a little bit more shake to him, right? And AJ's a little bit more sturdy, a little bit larger. So just kind of an interesting take there. You know who the worst wide receiver in that entire division is? It's Kadarius Toney. So I'm not sure.
Dude, he was good. I don't know what.
So this is the problem with Kadarius Toney, based off of two sources, TMZ and The Athletic. So I'm not sure which one you trust, but apparently he's getting under a lot of the players' skins because he thinks he's like the head honcho captain, and he's very undisciplined. He's late to practice. He hasn't been to any of the OTAs. I mean, obviously they're just getting up and running, but overall there are players in the locker room that are vehemently upset with him and do not want him on the team much longer. So
I love it. I knew there was something going on when there were trade rumors on it. I was like, he played pretty well, but I didn't know that yet. But there was definitely something there. But all right, we got to jump back.
This is the same guy who showed up to training camp without cleats last year or something like that too. So like, yeah, eventually it sounds like the Giants are just fed up with this dude at a certain point, and you can't blame him, right?
And the only thing worse about that situation about the Giants is their quarterback. I agree with you. The rest of their team isn't bad, but you can't win much with Daniel Jones. But we got to get out of the East here. Let Cy get some airtime as well. Cy, we were about to go on we ended up doing just top 3 most improved teams. We were about to go through, well, that was Dolan's third, and then we were about to go through Zach and I's third. But without knowing which teams the rest of us chose, give us maybe a couple of quick ones so you can catch up to speed here.
I like that.
And I just want to clarify real quick, is the goal with the draft and the offseason, right? It's not just based on draft. Okay, number 1 for me is the New York Jets. The draft was just insane. I mean, it was absolutely insane. And part of it was luck, just the way players fell to them. The fact that the best receiver and the best corner in that draft, in my opinion, and 2 guys that could be generational players at their respective positions, both had somebody picked before them, so the Jets had them available, was insane. And then them trading up to get an amazing DN at the end of the first round was just great. That draft alone, I think, made that offseason, and just that paired with some of the offseason moves, I just think the Jets have gotten significantly better. Do I think they're going to, win their division now? No, but do I think they're on pace if Zach Wilson plays well going forward to be a team that could make noise for the next 5 to 10 years? Yes, I very much believe that. Just number 1 for me. Number 2, all bias aside, I think is my Indianapolis Colts. The trade from Rocky Sin for Yannick is probably one of the most underrated moves of the offseason, just with everything else going on. Matt Ryan for a 3rd-round pick with our cap situation was beautiful, especially because the Falcons absorbed a lot of that. We went ahead and got Stephon Gilmore, which we haven't talked about really on this podcast, but my Gamecock, like that was just an awesome signing because we replaced Rakia with the former defensive player of the year and a pretty lockdown corner to take that spot. And then our draft was awesome. I was really happy with the positions we addressed, especially with us not having a 1st-round pick. Ballard getting absolute athletes. Like everyone he drafted just jumps off the paper in the sense of their athleticism, and that's just the kind of drafter he is. As a matter of fact, Zach, he drafted your tight end out of Virginia Tech, the 6'7", like 280, like runs like a 4.5 40 beast out of. And
he's UVA.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, he's not a Tech.
He's UVA.
I thought he was Tech. Yeah. This whole time I thought it was Virginia Tech.
He's arch enemy number 1. That's what he is.
Oh, I'm sorry. My fault. I was just excited. I thought it was a Hokie. No, him next to Mo Alley Cox is gonna be hilarious. You're gonna have like 2 like 6'7" like LeBrons playing tight end for us. So I'm excited about that. But no, seriously, I am super happy about our offseason. We addressed we addressed the tackle position, we addressed the receiver position in the 2nd round, and Matt Ryan obviously is going to be great. And the defense I think we'll have one of the best defenses in the NFL, without a doubt. And then the 3rd one's really hard for me because I think there's a lot of options here. I will say
real quick before you move on. The one big thing you forgot for the Colts is not only did you get Matt Ryan, but you now also don't have Carson Wentz. So win-win.
Carson Wentz was a lot better than Matt Ryan last year, though. Obviously, he was on a much worse situation.
Okay, all right.
That's just data. That's just data.
Oh wow! Right,
that's just data. That's just numbers.
Take the bait. Take the bait
right now.
So, but
I'm about to go back and pull so many clips of Evan absolutely trashing Carson Wentz last year.
We've been through this. I trash him as a human being, as a person, and that will never change. But I admit
you also didn't give him credit for his play last year.
At the beginning of the year, yes, but I agree. By the end of the year, I was giving him credit as top 15.
Zach can attest to that. You flipped your script on Carson Wentz the moment
so have you, though.
The Commanders traded for him. And I even when we traded him, said I didn't want to trade Carson Wentz. The only reason I was okay with it is because I didn't expect us to get 2 third-round picks for him. And that was like a steal because we lost the trade with the Eagles, but I think we definitely won the trade with y'all getting 2 third-round picks for him and then trading 1 for Matt Ryan. So I think that's about as good as you could have done given the circumstances and given the fact that you guys absorbed his entire contract, because I believe that if we traded him, we were going to have to eat some of his contract. So with all that in mind, I was happy with the trade. But I was always defending Carson Wentz, and I did not want to trade him. But I also didn't know Matt Ryan was the alternative, and I'm super happy with that. So, Dolan, I agree with you on that. The problem is this third team. Like, I'm really struggling with the third team. Have you guys even given your third team yet? Am I going to be first to give that? Or?
You can go last if you want. Dolan's given his 3. Zach, do you want to give your third and let Cy think a little bit?
Yeah, I might get kicked out of here. The security guard just came in and gave me a second warning, so he's not too happy with me. But
all right, we're approaching an hour anyway. Maybe we should just fire off some honorable mentions that weren't.
All right, I'll give a quick one. So I was at the Kenny Chesney concert in Charlotte. Brought the parents down. It was so much fun. Kenny C brought all the Panthers out, and Christian McCaffrey signed a football, and I was like, oh, that's now worth millions of dollars to whoever gets that. Then Sam Darnold and Matt Rule decided to take their pens up, and now it's worthless. So despite that, I will give a shout out to the Panthers. I do think that, infrastructurally, their defense is in a winnable position, top 10 defense in the league. Christian McCaffrey's coming back healthy. They just drafted one of the best left tackles in the draft, in my opinion. And DJ Moore is a pretty big stud. So if they can figure out that quarterback situation, maybe Darnold comes back, makes an impact. They're not going after Baker. Maybe Matt Corral is their guy, one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the league last year from Ole Miss. Who knows? They're one piece away, but if they can get it done, I really do think that team is potentially playoff caliber.
I've heard that one before.
I like Ev's reaction to that. His face the whole time was amazing.
I can't subscribe to that side.
A stretch.
Continue the podcast while without me. I'm getting summoned out by a security guard.
All right, brother.
See y'all.
Buddy.
What a world. I can't subscribe to his Panthers take at all. The other one is maybe hard, given that we've all kind of been around and mentioned a squad here. I think that the AFC West team is kind of early in the offseason. Obviously, the Chargers and Khalil Mack, and the Raiders getting Devontae Adams. I think both of those teams got better. They were already good. So, and the Chiefs, I think, did actually a decent job in the draft. And they lost Tyreek Hill, so it's going to be hard to replace that. But I think that division, Dolan mentioned the Broncos earlier, that division snugs up pretty good, given what those teams did. But otherwise, I think that's kind of everyone.
The Chargers weren't said until now. I think maybe a little draft recency bias is where we're thinking, but I think their offseason was amazing. Khalil Mack alone is just an absolute game changer. And then you throw on everything else on top of him, J.C. Jackson, bringing back Mike Williams, who I don't think Mike Williams is great. Talk about a guy who's not worth $20 million a year. I think you're looking at Mike Williams. A little better than Christian Kirk, but I would much rather pay A.J. Brown 25 than Mike Will 20. But that's just, again, the bias kicking in.
I agree with that. I think the draft recency got to me as well, because I think that division has several teams that you can make that argument for. So Ev's right about that. Actually, I would probably pick the Raiders or the Giants as my third team, because I think Devontae Adams is genuinely that incredible. And the fact that him and Derek Carr played together at Fresno State, I think is going to translate big when they play together this year. And then the Giants, I just touched on them. I think they really, really built their trenches. I'm not saying them improving means they're going to be a very competitive team this year, but I think that really helps establish their future, especially if, they make their decision about whether Daniel Jones or somebody else is their quarterback of the future. So I'm very excited to kind of see what they do going forward, but they really solidify those trenches. So those would be my three. I am curious, who were y'all's first two?
So we didn't really go in order per se, like you did, but my other two were Jets as well and Miami.
Okay.
I said Denver and Philly. Baltimore was my third. but Zach took them. So I actually pivoted to Green Bay, which is a bit of a contrarian approach, but I think their defense got so much better this offseason. And I think Aaron Rodgers can muster up enough offense without Devontae Adams to be able to have them be really good. I was saying earlier, I think drafting from that Georgia defense, we're going to look back at that in 3 to 5 years and be like, this is the same impact that drafting from that LSU offense a couple of years ago had. I think that defense was that good. And I think the Packers are going to shut down some teams this year. And Aaron Rodgers is always going to get the headlines, but I think that's going to be the reason they're still my NFC favorite. And so I think defensive improvements are why.
I was wondering if any of y'all would give my Colts some love, but I guess
we were waiting. We heard you were coming.
Yeah, they would have. They actually probably would have been maybe my third, given the teams that everyone else chose. Maybe the Raiders, but I knew you were going to say them, so I wanted to save.
Yeah,
save them for your appearance.
One that I have, not like the top tier, but I think a team that did get a lot better that I think will spur an interesting conversation is Pittsburgh. I legitimately think with how poorly Ben Roethlisberger played last year, even if they didn't draft Kenny Pickett, I think they were getting an upgrade at QB with Mitch Trubisky just because he brings a little mobility to the table. And I think if Kenny Pickett's any better than that, I think the Steelers got substantially better at the most important position in the sport. So interested to see what you guys think. It's really just a one move thing. It's not like their entire roster, got a lot better, but I think they were a playoff team with the corpse of Ben Roethlisberger last year. So already have a pretty good roster in-house, and I sneaky like the Pickens pick up in round 2 as well.
Them getting Pickett where they got him was insane. Getting him in the late 20s as the first quarterback was perfect, kind of for them to have him fall in their lap like that. I don't know if they were going to trade up for a quarterback, but just the fact that he was there probably made it too easy for them to just pull the trigger and say, hey, if Trubisky doesn't work out, this is our guy of the future. The other thing I will say about that is, even without adding, like you said, I think their defense is going to be significantly better this year because they had some injuries. But I don't know if you remember 2 years ago, the Pittsburgh defense was top 3 in the NFL. They were locking teams up, and I could definitely see them doing that again with Minkah Fitzpatrick playing up back to his potential and the surrounding pieces around him. So I would not be surprised if the Steelers make some noise this year. Honestly, that division, as good as the Ravens and Bengals and everybody else is, like, just because the Bengals made the Super Bowl doesn't mean they're a sure thing for that division, because that's a very competitive division overall. I'm a little weary on the Ravens, though. I will say that. I know that's not the topic of conversation, but I don't really know what to think. I like that they traded Marquise Brown and got a first-round pick. I did not expect him to get a first-round pick for him. I was really impressed by that. But at the same time, their offseason has been good, but is it good enough to win the division is what I'm kind of wrapping my mind around, and it seems like them and Lamar aren't on the same page. So I'm really curious about their future. They did have a good offseason. I won't dispute that, but I'm just curious about that. But yeah, I'll let you answer the Pittsburgh question first.
Health is the big thing for Baltimore. Just getting those guys back, I think, is huge.
Yeah,
I'm also surprised no one said Cleveland yet, but maybe
that's the one I forgot. That was actually probably going to be my third team. It's the team that got Deshaun Watson instead of Baker Mayfield and Amari Cooper. And a team that can already pound the rock, has a good defense. I think they made some defensive upgrades as well, if I'm not mistaken. But that's another one that should be mentioned. I think we're good. We're gonna have to edit some of this stuff.
We've been chatting for a while.
Yeah, it's my fault for joining late.
Yeah, we basically had to record 2 podcasts, Dolan, because everyone wanted a full podcast worth. But yeah, fun time in sports. NHL playoffs, NBA playoffs. I'm going to the Kentucky Derby this weekend, so. Most exciting 60 seconds in sports. So shout out Alex Wynn, friend of the show, former guest. He'll be in attendance. And then the NFL is right around the corner.
Your boy's also sitting.
Yeah, we can't talk about the. No, you're gonna say it. Sorry.
No, I'm saying your boy's also sitting behind home plate for the Mets-Nats game next Wednesday night. So
there we go.
If you tune in, you may see me. So look for the brown dude and hopefully a Lindor jersey. I'm trying to acquire one before then. So just throwing that out there.
Love that.
Hell yeah.
All right. That was Mondays Down South.
Mondays Down South.